My name is Connie, and I just turned 34 last month. I was the oldest of 3 siblings until yesterday when we buried my little sister Lily. Everyone had left the cemetery, but I stayed behind and saw my father Frank slip away with a wooden box tucked under his arm. I followed him to the river where he threw it in and walked away. When I heard a strange sound coming from inside that sinking box, everything in me froze. What was my father hiding? Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey as I uncover the truth that shattered my family forever. Growing up, our house was filled with laughter and warmth. My siblings and I were inseparable, Lily with her artistic soul, Thomas with his quick wit, and me, always the responsible one trying to keep everyone in line. Lily was 6 years younger than me, just 28 when she died, while Thomas at 30 was the middle child who somehow managed to be both peacemaker and troublemaker. Our mother, Eleanor, was a dedicated elementary school teacher who painted in her spare time. Dad was a structural engineer who built incredible dollhouses for us girls and taught Thomas everything about cars. We lived in a modest 2-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania with a sprawling backyard that hosted countless barbecues and birthday parties. I can still remember those Sunday dinners when Mom would cook pot roast and Dad would tell us stories about his latest building project. Lily would sit there with wide eyes, soaking in every word while sketching in her little notebook. Thomas would interrupt with questions, always curious about how things worked. Those were simple times filled with the kind of everyday happiness you only recognize as precious after it disappears. Everything changed 15 years ago when Mom died. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon and she was driving home from school. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the center line. The police said she died instantly, which was supposed to comfort us somehow. I was 19, then Thomas 15, and Lily only 13. Dad changed after that. The warmth drained from him like color from a photograph left too long in the Sunday. He threw himself into work, coming home late, barely speaking during meals. But what struck me as odd was how differently he treated Lily compared to Thomas and me. With us, he was distant, but still somewhat engaged. With Lily, there was always this underlying coldness, a subtle rejection that became more pronounced as the years passed. I remember Lily crying to me one night when she was 16 after Dad missed her art showcase at school. He had made it to Thomas's baseball games that same week, and even attended my college graduation ceremony the month before. When I confronted him about it, he just mumbled something about being busy and walked away. Lily was different from Thomas and me. While we inherited Dad's practicality and analytical mind, Lily was a dreamer like Mom. She had the same chestnut hair, the same way of tilting her head when she listened, the same creative spirit. Maybe that was why it hurt Dad to look at her. She was a living reminder of Mom. I moved out when I was 22 after landing a marketing job in Chicago about 4 hours away from our hometown. I met Jake there 2 years later, and we got married in a small ceremony. Dad attended but left immediately after. Lily was my maid of honor, staying with me for a week before the wedding, filling my apartment with her laughter and enthusiasm. Even after moving away, I called Lily at least twice a week. She had stayed in our hometown, taking classes at the community college and working part-time at an art supply store. She lived in a tiny apartment that was perpetually cluttered with canvases and paint supplies. Through our calls, I knew about her friends, her dating disasters, her dreams of opening her own gallery someday. What I didn't know, what I couldn't see across the distance I had put between us, were the signs that something was terribly wrong in her relationship with Dad. Looking back now, the clues were there in her voice when she mentioned him, in the way she changed subjects whenever I asked if they had spent any time together. But I was busy building my own life, and I missed what was happening right in front of me. Thomas had moved to Pittsburgh for work, but came home more frequently than I did. Later, he would tell me that he had noticed the tension between Dad and Lily growing worse over the past year. He had tried to talk to both of them separately, but neither would open up. If only I had visited more often, maybe I would have seen it too. Maybe I could have prevented what happened next. The last time I spoke to Lily was exactly 1 week before she died. It was a Thursday evening, and I was preparing dinner when my phone rang. I almost let it go to voicemail since Jake and I had dinner reservations later, but something made me pick up. Connie, Lily's voice sounded different, strained and hushed, like she was trying not to be overheard. "Hey, what's up? Everything okay?" I cradled the phone between my ear and shoulder as I continued chopping vegetables. "Not really." I found something in the attic yesterday when I was helping Dad clear out some old boxes. There was a pause and I heard her take a deep breath. There's this old wooden box with Mom's initials carved into it. I opened it and, Connie, I need to talk to you in person. I stopped chopping. What was in the box, Lily? I can't explain over the phone. It's about Mom and Dad and me. It changes everything. Her voice cracked. Can you come home this weekend? I really need you here. The urgency in her voice alarmed me, but I had an important presentation on Monday that I needed to prepare for. I can't this weekend, Lily. I have this huge client meeting. Can it wait until next weekend? Or can you tell me now? She was quiet for a moment. Next weekend should be fine. I need to process this. And I want you and Thomas both here when I explain. I'll call him too. Are you sure you're okay? You're scaring me a little. I'm fine. Just shocked. I'll explain everything when you come. Promise me, you'll be here next Friday. I promise. I'll drive up right after work. Thanks, Con. I love you. Love you too, Lil. Those were the last words I ever said to my sister. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, Thomas called me, his voice breaking as he told me Lily was dead. She had drowned in the river that ran behind our childhood home, the same river where we used to skip stones and catch frogs during summer vacations. I drove home immediately, my mind racing with questions. When I arrived, police cars were still parked outside the house. An officer explained that a neighbor walking their dog had found Lily's body washed up on the riverbank early that morning. They believed she had gone to the river the night before and accidentally fallen in. The autopsy would later confirm she had hit her head on a rock before entering the water, which explained why she hadn't been able to swim to safety despite being a strong swimmer. I found Dad sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall. He looked aged with dark circles under his eyes and a haunted expression I had never seen before. Dad, I touched his shoulder and he flinched as if I had struck him. She's gone, he said flatly, just like your mother. Something about his tone felt wrong. There was grief there certainly, but also something else. Guilt. I couldn't place it. Thomas arrived an hour later, and as we sat together trying to make sense of what had happened, he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. I called Lily on Friday night, he said quietly. Around 8. She was really upset, said she and Dad had a huge fight. I looked at Dad, who had suddenly become very interested in his coffee mug. What did you fight about? I asked him. Nothing important, he muttered. Just household stuff. She was always so emotional, just like your mother. So, you fought, and then what? She just decided to go sit by the river at night, I pressed. Dad stood up abruptly. I don't know what she did after she stormed out. I went to bed. He left the room, ending the conversation. Thomas and I exchanged looks. Something's not right, I whispered. While Dad was taking a shower, I went into Lily's old bedroom, which she still used when visiting. The room was in disarray, with drawers pulled open and contents scattered. It looked like someone had been searching for something. On her desk, her sketchbook lay open to a drawing of a wooden box intricately detailed with our mother's initials ERM carved into the top. Eleanor Rose Morgan. The wooden box Lily had mentioned on the phone. I searched the room but couldn't find the box itself. When I asked Dad about it later, he claimed he didn't know what I was talking about. His eyes, however, flickered momentarily to the cabinet in his study before he regained his composure. That night, I tried to get into Dad's study, but he had locked the door, something he never used to do. Thomas thought I was being paranoid, suggesting that Lily's death was affecting my thinking. Maybe he was right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Dad was hiding something crucial about my sister's final days. As we prepared for Lily's funeral, Dad remained distant, refusing to discuss the circumstances of her death. When the police officially ruled it an accident, he seemed to relax slightly, but the haunted look in his eyes remained. I wanted to press him further about the wooden box and the fight with Lily, but every time I tried, he would shut down or find a reason to leave the room. The day before the funeral, I overheard Dad on the phone with someone. It's taken care of, he said in a low voice. No one will ever know. When he saw me standing in the doorway, he quickly hung up and claimed it was a work call, but Dad had been retired for 3 years. By then, I was certain that whatever had been in that wooden box was somehow connected to Lily's death, and Dad knew exactly what had happened to my sister. The day of Lily's funeral arrived with a fittingly somber sky. Dark clouds hung low, occasionally releasing a light drizzle that felt like the heavens themselves were weeping for my sister. The cemetery was crowded with people from all parts of Lily's life. Her coworkers from the art store, professors from her classes, childhood friends and neighbors, all gathered under black umbrellas, their faces etched with disbelief that someone so vibrant could be gone. I stood between Thomas and Dad as the pastor spoke about Lily's gentle spirit and creative soul. Dad maintained a stoic expression, accepting condolences with short nods and mumbled thanks. But I noticed how his eyes darted around nervously, as if he expected someone to stand up and accuse him of something. Several of Lily's friends shared memories that made us laugh through our tears. Her best friend Andrea described how Lily once painted an entire mural on the wall of her apartment as a surprise birthday gift, staying up for 2 days straight to finish it. Another friend recalled Lily's tradition of giving handmade Christmas ornaments every year, each one personalized to capture something meaningful about the recipient. Throughout the service, I kept thinking about our last conversation and that wooden box. What had Lily discovered that was so important she needed to tell me in person? What secrets could have led to a fight so severe that she ended up dead just hours later? After the burial, everyone gathered at our family home for the reception. I watched Dad carefully as he moved through the crowded living room, accepting condolences with the appropriate expressions of grief. But something was off about his behavior. He kept checking his watch and glancing toward his study. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd thinned until only close family and a few of Lily's best friends remained. Around 5:30, I saw Dad slip away from a conversation and disappear down the hallway. Trusting my instincts, I excused myself from Thomas and Andrea and followed him at a distance. Dad entered his study, emerging minutes later with something tucked under his arm wrapped in a dark cloth. He headed toward the back door, moving quickly and checking over his shoulder. I waited until he was outside before following, staying far enough behind that he wouldn't notice me. The path from our backyard led through a small wooded area to the river, about a quarter-mile from the house. The rain had stopped, but the ground was muddy and slippery. I followed Dad's footprints, careful to stay hidden behind trees whenever he paused to look around. When he reached the riverbank, Dad unwrapped the object, revealing a wooden box about the size of a large book. Even from my hiding place several yards away, I could see the intricate carvings on its surface and my mother's initials near the latch. This had to be the box Lily had mentioned. Dad stood at the edge of the water, holding the box in both hands. For a moment, he just stared at it, his shoulders slumped in what looked like defeat. Then he kissed the top of the box and whispered something I couldn't hear. With a sudden, forceful motion, he threw the box as far as he could into the river. But something unexpected happened. When the box hit the water, I heard a distinct sound. Not the splash of wood hitting water, but a muffled thump, followed by what sounded almost like a whimper or a squeak. The box didn't sink immediately, instead, floating for a few seconds before the current began to carry it downstream. Dad stood watching until the box disappeared around a bend in the river. Then he wiped his hands on his pants as if ridding himself of something distasteful and turned to head back to the house. I ducked behind a large oak tree until he passed, then ran to the riverbank. "Please be empty," I whispered as I kicked off my shoes and waded into the cold water. "Please just be papers or photos or something meaningless." But I knew it wasn't meaningless. Not if Dad had waited until after the funeral to dispose of it. Not if Lily had been so disturbed by its contents that she needed to talk to me in person. Not if it might explain why my sister was dead. The current was stronger than I expected, and the rocks beneath my feet were slippery. I stumbled several times, soaking my black dress up to my waist. The box had floated quite a distance, finally catching on a fallen tree branch about 50 yards downstream. By the time I reached it, my teeth were chattering from the cold water. I grabbed the box, surprised by its weight. It was beautifully crafted from dark walnut wood, with intricate floral patterns carved all around the edges. The brass latch was shaped like a rose with my mother's initials ERM, carved directly above it. A small keyhole indicated it was locked, but water had begun seeping in through the seams. As I waded back to shore, I heard that sound again. A faint noise coming from inside the box, like paper rustling or something shifting. Whatever Dad had tried to send to a watery grave, it wasn't going quietly. Back on dry land, I sat on a large rock and examined the box more closely. It was old but well-maintained, the wood still smooth and polished despite years of storage. I tried the latch, confirming it was indeed locked. Without the key, I would need to break it open. Using a sharp rock, I began working at the latch, my hands shaking both from cold and from fear of what I might find. The brass finally gave way with a snap, and I hesitated before lifting the lid. In that moment, with my funeral clothes soaked and my sister in the ground, I suddenly wasn't sure I wanted to know what secrets had been worth Lily's life. But I had come too far to turn back. Taking a deep breath, I opened the box. The first thing I saw was a small leather-bound journal with a faded blue cover. I recognized it immediately as my mother's diary, the one she used to write in every night before bed. Next to it was a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, their edges yellowed with age. There were about 20 envelopes, each addressed to my mother in an unfamiliar masculine handwriting. The return address bore the name Daniel Harmon. My hands trembled as I lifted the journal out. Who was Daniel Harmon? And why would Dad want to dispose of Mom's personal writings after all these years? I opened the journal to a random page, dated June 12, 1996, about a year before Lily was born. Frank is gone on another extended business trip, 3 months this time in Saudi Arabia. The house feels so empty with just me and the children. Connie is so helpful with Thomas, but I miss adult conversation. Daniel called today. We met for coffee and talked for hours. He makes me feel alive again, seen in a way Frank hasn't in years. My heart pounded as I flipped through more entries, watching my mother's relationship with this Daniel unfold through her private thoughts. They had been college sweethearts before she met my father. They reconnected when Daniel moved to town for work, both feeling trapped in their separate lives. The entries became increasingly intimate, describing secret meetings and growing feelings that my mother struggled to reconcile with her commitment to our family. Then came an entry that made my blood run cold. October 3, 1996. I'm pregnant. The timing makes it impossible to be Frank's. It can only be Daniel's child. I don't know what to do. Frank returns from overseas in 2 weeks. He'll think the baby is his, and maybe that's for the best. Our family is already established. Connie and Thomas need stability. But am I prepared to live this lie forever? Daniel deserves to know he has a child, but telling him would destroy multiple families. I feel trapped in an impossible situation of my own making. I sat on the riverbank, my wet clothes forgotten as the truth crashed over me like a wave. Lily was not my father's biological daughter. She was the product of my mother's affair with this man, Daniel Harmon. With shaking hands, I untied the bundle of letters. They were love letters from Daniel to my mother spanning several years. The earlier ones were passionate declarations of rekindled feelings. The later ones showed the painful unwinding of their relationship after my mother told him she was pregnant but planned to stay with her husband. The last letter was dated just after Lily's birth. Eleanor, I respect your decision to raise our daughter within your marriage. Perhaps it is better for her to have the stability of the family you've built. I am moving to Seattle next month for a fresh start. Know that I will always wonder about her, always love her from afar, even if I can never claim her as my own. If she ever needs anything or if you ever change your mind about us, this door will remain open. Forever yours, Daniel. Beneath the letters was an official-looking document. I pulled it out to discover it was Lily's original birth certificate. The father's name was blank, not Frank Morgan, as I had always assumed. Next was a small USB drive. I slipped it into my pocket to examine later. At the very bottom of the box was an envelope addressed to me in Lily's familiar handwriting. With tears streaming down my face, I opened it and began to read. Dear Connie, if you're reading this, something has probably happened to me. I found this box 3 days ago while helping Dad clean the attic. I was looking for Mom's old paintings when I discovered it hidden inside a locked trunk. I know I shouldn't have picked the lock, but something told me it was important. What I found inside has shattered everything I thought I knew about our family. Mom had an affair. I'm not Dad's biological daughter. It explains so much about why he's always been different with me, why he could never quite look me in the eyes the way he does with you and Thomas. I confronted Dad yesterday. It didn't go well. He admitted he found out the truth 3 years ago while going through Mom's things. He found these letters and her journal. He's known all this time and has been silently hating me for it, as if I had any control over how I came into this world. I'm going to tell you and Thomas everything when you visit next weekend. You deserve to know the truth about our family. I've also made a recording of my conversation with Dad. It's on the USB drive in this box. His reaction terrified me, Connie. He said things I never thought I'd hear from him. I don't know what happens next, but I know I can't keep living with this secret. Maybe I'll try to find Daniel Harmon, my real father. Maybe we all need to start over with the truth, however painful it might be. I love you. Please help Thomas understand when I tell you both everything. Your sister always, Lily. My hands shook so badly that I dropped the letter. A recording, I needed to hear it immediately. I gathered everything back into the box, tucked it under my arm, and hurried back toward the house, my mind racing with questions and a growing sense of dread. Back at the house, I slipped in through the side door and up to my old bedroom, avoiding the few remaining guests. I changed into dry clothes, then plugged the USB drive into my laptop. There was one audio file recorded just 8 days ago. I put in my earbuds and pressed play. Lily's voice came first, tearful but determined. I know the truth, Dad. I found Mom's journal and the letters. I know you're not my biological father. Dad's voice sounded strangled. You had no right to go through that box. Those were private things. Private. This is my life, my identity. You've known for 3 years and said nothing, just treated me with increasing coldness and resentment. How could you? What did you expect me to do? Celebrate finding out my wife cheated on me, finding out you're not even my daughter, that I raised another man's child thinking she was mine? The argument escalated, with Lily demanding to know if Thomas and I were aware of the truth. Dad insisted no one knew that he had kept the secret to protect the family, but Lily wasn't having it. You didn't do it to protect us. You did it to protect yourself, your pride. Well, I'm telling Connie and Thomas next weekend. They deserve to know, and I deserve to know, about my real father. Dad's voice became frighteningly cold. You will do no such thing. This stays buried, Lily. Your mother is gone. Daniel Harmon has his own life now. Opening this wound will help no one. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you what's going to happen. There was a sound of movement, something falling. Dad's voice came again, louder now. You are not my daughter. You never were. You've always been different, always been a reminder of your mother's betrayal. Sometimes I look at you and all I can see is the lie. Lily was crying now. I'm leaving. I'm going to the river to think. When Connie and Thomas get here next weekend, I'm telling them everything, and then I'm going to find Daniel Harmon. The recording ended with the sound of a door slamming. I sat, frozen, tears streaming down my face. The coldness in Dad's voice was like nothing I'd ever heard from him before. And those words, you are not my daughter. You never were. The next item in the box confirmed my growing suspicions. It was a printed email from Lily to a private investigator dated just 5 days before her death, asking for help locating Daniel Harmon, last known to be living in Seattle. The investigator's response indicated he had found Daniel, now a successful architect, with his own firm, married, but with no other children. I thought about the timing. Lily found the box and confronted Dad. They argued bitterly. She went to the river to think, the same river where she was found dead the next morning. The police said she hit her head on a rock and drowned. An accident, they concluded. But what if it wasn't an accident? What if Dad had followed her to the river that night? What if their argument had continued and turned physical? The thought made me sick, but I couldn't dismiss it. Dad had tried to dispose of this box after the funeral, clearly hoping the evidence would disappear forever. He had been acting strangely since Lily's death. And now I knew he had a powerful motive to silence her, preventing her from revealing a family secret he desperately wanted to keep buried. I carefully repacked the box, my mind made up. I needed to confront my father with what I had found. And if my worst fears were confirmed, I would have to decide whether blood loyalty extended to protecting a man who might have been responsible for my sister's death, biological father, or not. By the time I returned to the main floor of the house, most of the funeral guests had left. Thomas was in the kitchen washing dishes, while Dad sat alone in the living room, staring into a glass of whiskey. I clutched the wooden box tightly against my chest, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Dad. I said, my voice steadier than I expected. We need to talk. He looked up, his face drawn with exhaustion and grief. Then his eyes fell on the box in my arms, and every muscle in his body tensed. His face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "From the river. I saw you throw it in." I stepped further into the room. "I know everything, Dad. I know about Mom's affair with Daniel Harmon. I know Lily wasn't your biological daughter. And I know you and Lily fought about this the night she died." Dad stood up suddenly, his whiskey glass falling to the floor and shattering. "Give me the box, Connie." He held out his hand, his expression darkening. "Those are private family matters that should stay buried." Buried like Lily. The words came out before I could stop them, hanging in the air between us like an accusation. His eyes widened. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know, Dad. You tell me. You found out your wife had an affair. You discovered Lily wasn't your biological child. You kept that secret for 3 years, growing increasingly distant and cold toward her. Then she found out the truth, threatened to tell everyone, and ended up dead the very same night. Now you're trying to dispose of all the evidence. What conclusion would you draw?" Dad lunged forward, trying to grab the box from my arms. I stepped back, holding it out of his reach. The sudden movement caught Thomas's attention, and he appeared in the doorway, drying his hands on a kitchen towel. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us with confusion. "Your sister has developed quite an imagination," Dad said, his voice strained. "Connie, give me that box. It contains personal items of your mother's that aren't meant to be shared." "It contains the truth," I countered, turning to Thomas. "Lily wasn't Dad's biological daughter. Mom had an affair with a man named Daniel Harmon. Lily found out and confronted Dad about it the night she died." Thomas stared at me in disbelief, then looked to Dad for denial. But our father's face had crumpled, the fight suddenly draining out of him. He sank back onto the sofa and buried his face in his hands. "How long have you known?" I pressed, setting the box down on the coffee table but keeping my hand protectively on top of it. "Lily's letter said 3 years, but I want to hear it from you." Dad took a shuddering breath. 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. The precision of his answer chilled me. "I was going through your mother's things, finally ready to donate some of her clothes. The box was hidden at the back of her closet. I should never have opened it." "But you did," I said. "And instead of talking to Lily about it, you just began to silently hate her." "I didn't hate her," Dad protested weakly. "I just couldn't look at her the same way. Every time I saw her, I saw your mother's betrayal. I saw this stranger Daniel in her features. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking, her artistic talent, her emotional nature. None of that came from me. She was living proof that your mother loved another man." Thomas had moved further into the room, his expression stunned. But she was still Lily, still the same person she'd always been. Nothing about her had changed except your knowledge. "You don't understand," Dad said, looking up at Thomas. "Finding out changed everything for me. It made me question my whole life with your mother. Every memory became suspect. Was she thinking about him when we celebrated our anniversaries? When we went on family vacations, was I just a convenient provider while she carried another man's child? Do you have any idea what that does to a man?" "It doesn't justify how you treated Lily," I said firmly, "or what happened to her." Dad's head snapped up. "What are you implying, Connie?" I pulled Lily's letter from the box and handed it to Thomas. Then I took out my laptop and played the recorded argument for both of them to hear. Dad seemed to shrink with each exchange, especially when his cold, cruel words filled the room. "You are not my daughter. You never were." When the recording ended, I closed my laptop and looked directly at Dad. Lily went to the river after this argument. She was found dead the next morning. The police called it an accident, but was it, Dad? Did you follow her there? Did your argument continue by the riverbank? "Stop it," Dad whispered, his face ashen. "Just stop." "Did you push her? Did she fall and hit her head? Is that why you've been acting so strange since it happened? Is that why you tried to get rid of this box today?" "Connie, that's enough," Thomas interjected, though his voice wavered. "You can't seriously think Dad would hurt Lily." "I don't know what to think anymore," I said, not taking my eyes off our father. "All I know is that Lily found this box confronted. Dad threatened to tell us the truth and ended up dead the same night. Then Dad tried to dispose of all the evidence after her funeral. Those aren't the actions of an innocent man." Dad had begun to tremble, tears streaming down his weathered face. The sight of him breaking down should have moved me to compassion, but all I felt was a cold determination to uncover the truth about my sister's death. "Tell us what really happened that night, Dad," I demanded. "No more secrets, no more lies. Lily deserves at least that much." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was Dad's ragged breathing. Then, in a voice barely audible, he began to speak. "I followed her to the river. I was angry, hurt. I wanted her to promise not to tell anyone, to just let it all stay buried." We argued more. She was standing close to the edge. He paused, swallowing hard. "She said she was going to find Daniel, that maybe he would be more of a father to her than I had been." I grabbed her arm. I just wanted her to stay to listen. She pulled away and she slipped. Thomas made a choked sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. I felt numb watching Dad's confession unfold, like I was outside my body observing a stranger. She hit her head on the rocks as she fell. There was blood, and then she rolled into the water. It happened so fast. I tried to reach her, but the current was strong and she disappeared under the surface. Dad looked up, his eyes pleading. "It was an accident, Connie. I swear to God it was an accident. I never meant to hurt her." "But you didn't call for help," I said quietly. "You didn't report it. You let everyone believe she had drowned accidentally." I panicked, Dad admitted, his voice breaking. "I knew how it would look. The argument, the box, the truth about her paternity. Who would believe it was an accident? I made a terrible mistake. I've been living in hell ever since." I was about to respond when a noise from the hallway caught our attention. We turned to see Thomas's wife Julia standing there, her face pale with shock. "I came to see if you needed help with the guests," she said softly. "I heard everything." The room fell silent as we all realized the secret was now outspreading beyond our immediate family. And with that realization came the unspoken question of what happened next. Would we protect Dad and his terrible secret? Or would we bring Lily's true story into the light, whatever the consequences might be? The five of us gathered around the kitchen table, me, Thomas, Dad, Julia, and Andrea, Lily's best friend, who had stayed behind to help clean up. After Julia overheard our conversation, Thomas felt Andrea deserved to know the truth as well, since she had been like family to Lily. Dad didn't protest. He seemed beyond fighting now. I placed the wooden box in the center of the table, a physical representation of the secrets that had torn our family apart. One by one, I showed them the contents: Mom's journal, the letters from Daniel, Lily's birth certificate, her letter to me, and the USB with the recorded argument. "Thomas," I said, turning to my brother, "did you know anything about this? Did you ever suspect?" He shook his head slowly. "I knew something was wrong between Dad and Lily, especially these last few years. But nothing like this." He turned to Dad. "You said you found the box 3 years ago. That's when everything changed between you and Lily, wasn't it? All those missed birthdays, the way you'd leave the room when she came in, how you never asked about her art anymore." Dad nodded, his eyes fixed on the table. "I couldn't bear it. Every time I looked at her, I saw your mother's betrayal. I saw this stranger, this Daniel in her features. I tried to act normal, but instead you punished her for something that wasn't her fault," Andrea said, her voice tight with anger. "Lily never understood why you pulled away. She tried so hard to make you proud." "I know," Dad whispered. "I know that now." "What I don't understand," Julia said, "is why you never confronted Eleanor about this when she was alive. This affair happened, 28 years ago? You had 15 years with her after Lily was born. Did you never suspect?" Dad shook his head. "Never. Eleanor was good at keeping secrets, apparently." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. "I was away on international projects a lot when the kids were young. 3-month stretches in Saudi Arabia, Asia, South America, building bridges, dams, skyscrapers. I provided well for my family, but I wasn't always present. I suppose that gave her opportunities." "That doesn't excuse an affair," Thomas said. "No," I agreed, "but it might explain the distance that developed in their marriage." I turned to Dad. "After you found the box, did you try to find Daniel Harmon?" A flicker of something dark crossed his face. "Yes, I hired a private investigator. Daniel lives in Seattle now. He owns a successful architecture firm. Married, no children. The perfect life, untouched by the mess he helped create. Did you contact him? Andrea asked. I drove to Seattle 6 months ago, sat outside his office building for hours watching him come and go. Successful, confident, everything I used to be before I discovered the truth. Dad's hands clenched into fists. I followed him to a restaurant one evening, sat at the bar watching him dine with his wife. I wanted to confront him to let him know what he'd done to my family. In the end, I couldn't do it. I drove back home and tried to bury it all again. And Lily found the box last week. I continued piecing the timeline together. She confronted you, threatened to tell Thomas and me everything, and said she wanted to find Daniel. Yes, Dad admitted. She was so angry, hurt, that I'd known for years and never told her. She couldn't understand why I'd been so cold to her. She said she had a right to know her biological father. And that's when you followed her to the river, Thomas said, his voice hollow. Dad nodded, tears streaming down his face. I just wanted her to listen, to understand why this needed to stay buried. Your mother was gone. Why drag her name through the mud? Why upend everyone's lives with a truth that would only cause pain? Because it was Lily's truth, Andrea said firmly. Her identity, her history. You had no right to keep it from her. I know that now, Dad said, his voice breaking. God, I know that now. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the hardest question. Dad, tell us exactly what happened at the river, the complete truth. He closed his eyes as if visualizing the scene. I followed her there. She was sitting on that big flat rock where you kids used to play. When she saw me, she stood up, said she didn't want to talk anymore. I grabbed her arm to make her stay. She pulled away, and I pushed her. A collective gasp filled the room. Dad had previously said Lily slipped. Now he was admitting he had pushed her. I didn't mean to push her hard, he continued, his voice barely audible. I was angry. She lost her balance, fell backward. Her head hit the rock outcropping as she fell. There was blood. Then she rolled into the water. I tried to reach her, I swear I did, but the current was strong after the rainfall that week. She disappeared under the surface so quickly. And you just left her there, I said, my voice cold. You didn't call for help. You went home and pretended nothing had happened. I panicked, Dad repeated, as if that explained everything. I told myself it was an accident, that no one would believe me if I reported it. By morning, I had convinced myself that maybe she wasn't dead, that she had swum to safety downstream. Then the neighbor found her body, and I knew. His voice trailed off. The kitchen fell silent as we absorbed the full horror of what had happened. My father had pushed my sister during an argument, causing her to fall, hit her head, and drown in the river. Then he had covered it up, letting everyone believe it was a simple accident. We need to go to the police, I finally said, breaking the silence. Lily deserves justice. Connie, please, Dad begged, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled away. It was an accident. I didn't mean for her to fall. But you pushed her, Thomas said, his voice hard. And then you lied about it. You tried to dispose of evidence. Those aren't the actions of an innocent man, Dad. What will happen to the family if this comes out? Dad asked desperately. Thomas, you're just starting your career. Connie, you and Jake are talking about starting a family. This scandal will follow all of us forever. Are you seriously asking us to keep this secret? I stared at him in disbelief. To pretend our sister's death was an accident when we know it wasn't. I'm asking you to consider what Lily would want, Dad said. Would she want our family destroyed? Would she want her memory tainted by all this ugliness? Don't you dare use Lily to justify covering this up, Andrea snapped. She wanted the truth to come out. That's why she was going to tell Connie and Thomas everything. The five of us sat in heavy silence, the weight of the decision before us, pressing down like a physical force. Tell the police the truth, sending Dad to prison, and exposing our family's deepest secrets to public scrutiny, or keep it all hidden, allowing Dad to escape justice, while Lily's true story remained untold. Thomas was the first to speak. I can't live with this secret, he said quietly. I can't look at Dad every day knowing what he did to Lily. I can't attend family gatherings or celebrate holidays pretending everything is normal. The truth has to come out. Julia reached for his hand, squeezing it in silent support. I nodded, my decision made as well. I agree. We're going to the police first thing tomorrow morning. All of us together, with all the evidence. I looked at Dad across the table, this man I had loved and respected my entire life, now revealed as a stranger capable of terrible things. I'm sorry, Dad, but this is the right thing to do. Dad seemed to age before our eyes, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand, he said, his voice hollow. I'll go upstairs and pack a few things. As he stood to leave the kitchen, Thomas spoke up. One more thing, Dad. Did you ever truly love Lily, even knowing she wasn't your biological daughter? Dad paused in the doorway, his back to us. I tried, he said after a long moment. For 15 years I thought she was mine and I loved her completely. Then I found out the truth, and that love became tangled up with betrayal and resentment. I couldn't separate the two anymore. He turned slightly, his profile visible in the dim hallway light. But when I saw her in the river, when I realized what I'd done, all I felt was love again. Pure love and devastating loss. It came too late to save her. Too late to save any of us. With that, he disappeared up the stairs, leaving the four of us to sit with the terrible truth and the decision we had made to bring it into the light. There's one more thing we need to consider, I said after a moment. Daniel Harmon, Lily's biological father. He doesn't know any of this. He doesn't even know he has a daughter, let alone that she's dead. He deserves to know, Andrea said. Lily wanted to find him. Thomas nodded slowly. After we go to the police, after all this is settled, we should contact him. Tell him about Lily. Show him photos, share memories. Let him know who his daughter was, even if he never got to meet her. In that moment, amid all the pain and betrayal, we found a small thread of purpose to hold on to. We couldn't bring Lily back, but we could honor her wishes. We could bring the truth to light. We could introduce her in memory, at least to the father she never knew. And somehow that felt like the first step toward healing. The months following that night were among the most difficult of my life. True to our word, we went to the police the next morning. Dad came with us voluntarily, carrying the wooden box himself. He made a full confession, explaining how he had discovered Lily wasn't his biological daughter, how they had argued that night by the river, and how he had pushed her, causing her to fall, hit her head, and drown. The media descended on our small town like vultures. Local man confesses to killing daughter after paternity revelation. The headlines screamed. Our family history was dissected in newspapers and on true crime podcasts. Strangers debated whether Dad's actions constituted murder, manslaughter, or a tragic accident. In the end, the district attorney charged Dad with involuntary manslaughter. His attorney negotiated a plea deal, 7 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5, taking into account Dad's age, his voluntary confession, and the circumstances surrounding the incident. The day of his sentencing, Dad stood in court, looking much older than his 68 years. His shoulders slumped under the weight of his actions. When asked if he wanted to make a statement, he turned not to the judge, but to Thomas and me sitting in the front row. I failed as a father, he said, his voice trembling. I let anger and pride poison my heart. I took for granted the gift I had been given in raising Lily. Biology doesn't make a father, love does. I forgot that, and it cost Lily her life. It cost me everything. I can never undo what I've done, but I hope someday you can find it in your hearts to forgive me, even though I may never forgive myself. As the bailiff led him away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, grief for Lily, anger at Dad, relief that justice had been served, and an overwhelming sadness for our broken family. Thomas and I walked out of that courtroom knowing nothing would ever be the same again. 2 weeks later, we traveled to Seattle to meet Daniel Harmon. We had contacted him shortly after going to the police, explaining the situation in a carefully worded email. His response came within hours. I need to meet you. I need to know about my daughter. Daniel was nothing like I had imagined from reading Mom's journal. At 66, he was tall and distinguished with silver hair and the same artistic sensibility that Lily had possessed. He welcomed us into his beautiful home overlooking Puget Sound, where he lived with his wife of 30 years, Margaret. I never knew, he told us, sitting in his sunlit living room surrounded by photos of his life with Margaret. Eleanor never told me she was pregnant. After she ended our relationship, I respected her decision to stay with her family. I moved away, built a new life. Not a day went by that I didn't think of her, but I never imagined we had a child together. I had brought a photo album of Lily's life, from baby pictures to her college graduation. Daniel's hands trembled as he turned the pages, seeing his daughter's face for the first time. The resemblance was striking now that I knew to look for it. They had the same expressive eyes, the same creative spirit, evident even in photographs. She was an artist, I told him, showing him photos of Lily's paintings. She worked primarily in watercolors, but she experimented with all media. She loved capturing ordinary moments and making them extraordinary. Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. I can see it in her work, the way she uses light, the perspective. It's like looking at my own early paintings. Margaret sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder, offering silent support as he learned about the daughter he would never meet. We couldn't have children, she explained quietly to me. We tried for years, then eventually accepted it wasn't meant to be. To discover now that Daniel had a daughter all this time. She would have loved to meet you both, Thomas said. That was her plan before. Daniel wiped his eyes. I wish I had known. I wish I could have seen her even once. Told her she was wanted, that her existence meant something to me. We spent the day sharing stories about Lily building a bridge between the life she had lived and the father she never knew. Before we left, Daniel gave us each a small painting he had created, scenes of the river where Lily had played as a child based on the photos we had shown him. To remember her by, he said, and to remember that even broken stories can create something beautiful. 6 months later, Daniel joined us for a private memorial service at the river. We scattered some of Lily's ashes in the water, while Daniel played the violin, a talent Lily had also possessed. Thomas read a poem Lily had written in college, and Andrea shared memories of their friendship. It was a small gathering, just the people who had truly loved her coming together to honor her memory. Afterward, we established the Lily Morgan Memorial Scholarship for young artists at the local community college where she had studied. Daniel made a generous contribution, ensuring that Lily's creative spirit would live on through other young talents. As for Dad, I finally visited him in prison a year after his sentencing. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, sitting across from him in that sterile visitation room, seeing him in a prison uniform, his face lined with regret. I've been doing a lot of thinking in here, he said. About family, about forgiveness, about what makes someone a father. I had it all wrong, Connie. I let pride and hurt feelings blind me to what was important. Lily was my daughter in every way that mattered. I raised her, watched her take her first steps, helped her learn to ride a bike. Biology didn't change any of that, but I let it poison everything. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I need you to know that I understand what I threw away, and because I hope that someday after I've served my time we might find a way to be a family again. Not like before, that's impossible. But something new built on truth this time. I didn't make any promises that day. The wound was still too fresh, the loss too profound. But I did leave the door open to possibility, to the hope that with time and genuine remorse, some form of forgiveness might be possible. Now, 3 years later, I'm expecting my first child, a girl. Jake and I have decided to give her the middle name Lily to honor the aunt she'll never meet. Thomas and Julia have a 1-year-old son and are building their life in Pittsburgh. We get together often, determined to maintain the family bonds that remain. I still visit Dad in prison every few months. Our relationship is different now, more honest in some ways. We talk about Lily openly, sharing memories without the shadow of secrets. Dad will be eligible for parole next year. I don't know what our family will look like when he returns to the outside world, but I know we'll face it together with the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving the unthinkable. The wooden box sits on my mantle, now a reminder of how destructive secrets can be. I've removed the painful items, but kept Mom's journal and some of the happier letters, along with Lily's artwork and photographs. It serves as a daily reminder that truth, however painful, is always better than deception. That families are built not just on blood, but on love, forgiveness, and courage. Sometimes I go to the river alone, to the spot where Lily died. I talk to her, tell her about my life, about meeting Daniel, about the scholarship and her name. I like to think she knows somehow that her story didn't end that night. That in bringing the truth to light, painful as it was, we honored her final wish. Secrets are like stones thrown into rivers. They may sink from sight, but they create ripples that change everything they touch. Our family learned this in the hardest possible way. But we also learned that even after the most devastating truths are revealed, there is still the possibility of healing, of rebuilding, of finding meaning in the wreckage. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you saw someone you loved? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story touched you in any way, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that truth, however painful is the first step toward healing. Thank you for listening, and remember it's never too late to seek the truth or to begin again.